Monsieur.
Mr. President, President of the Council, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Francophonie and the Central Africans abroad, President and distinguished members of the Council, I wish at the outset echo the voice of the Council and that of the Secretary-General to renew my deepest condolences to the families of the blue helmets that fell victim to explosive devices. I also express my deepest condolences to the government and people of Bangladesh. I also bow down before the memory of all peacekeepers that have sacrificed their lives in the implementation of MINUSCA's mandate to ensure the restoration of peace and security in the Central African Republic. I call upon the government of the CAR to lift the ban on night flights. Night flights are crucial to ensure the safety and security of blue helmets as well as of humanitarian actors and of all partners on the ground and of civilian persons and civilian personnel and people in humanitarian need. I must point out here that the ban on night flights deprives our pilots deployed in the CAR of the minimum number of hours of flight required to retain their certificates that they have all lost as a result of a de facto disqualification, having not reached the required number of flying hours. I appreciate the privilege offered to me by this Council to share my observations with its members regarding major developments in the country that deserve your attention 4 months after our last consideration of the situation in the CAR. Indeed, critical analysis of the progress made in the implementation of the strategic priorities of MINUSCA's multidimensional mandate is necessary on the following 4 fronts. 1. The political and security dynamics. 2. Ways to safeguard acquis with the implementation of MINUSCA's mandate. 3. Prospects for the decentralization of the political and peace process. And 4. The extension of the state's authority to find lasting political solutions to the root causes of the political security conflict in the CAR. In terms of security, MINUSCA's support has proved decisive. While remaining entirely cognizant of the threats and risks and accompanying them in their mission and always adhering to the concept of operations of MINUSCA while ensuring that no prejudice is done to the primary responsibility of the government, MINUSCA has played a key role in protecting civilian populations and in providing humanitarian aid, and it's done that by retaining a robust preventive and proactive approach in response to warnings received from the communities. This posture has emerged through our concept of operations and has made it possible for the MINUSCA forces to act preventatively to ensure security in the northeast of the CAR and to restore an environment propitious to the protection of civilians and the provision of humanitarian assistance, as well as to progress with the DDR program and the smooth functioning of territorial administrations. MINUSCA's posture has also made it possible to cut off routes of supply to armed groups. We will continue to support the redeployment of domestic security and defence forces with full respect for the human rights due diligence policy. However, we note with concern that the protection of civilians against abuse and physical violence continues to be hindered by threats posed by a resurgence of activities by armed groups on the border areas of the western sector of the CAR. These areas are most affected by the laying of mines and explosive devices. Mines and devices of which our own force has fallen victim and did so at the beginning of this month. As things stand, our force is fully operational and holding joint operations with the National Defence and Security Forces to stamp out threats caused by armed groups, as well as to protect civilians, facilitate humanitarian assistance, and to support the DDRR program in the centre of the country. The resurgence of armed groups' activities and the use of explosive devices in the border areas in the northwest of the country is making it difficult, if not impossible, to access people who have urgent and vital need of humanitarian assistance. All of the above confirms that the absence of deliberate and mass attacks against civilians during the reporting period in no way means that these attacks are not prevalent and that they will be until all parties to the conflict renounce violence. The people of the CAR, particularly the most vulnerable among them, continue to pay the highest price in this conflict. There needs to be more than the simply robust posture of MINUSCA and the security capabilities of the government if we are to re-establish in a lasting fashion security across the whole of CAR's territory. There must also be an environment created which is propitious to a political settlement of the CAR crisis, and armed groups need to renounce the use of violence and armed offences as a means to see their demands met. As such, MINUSCA welcomes the establishment and the beginning of the implementation of the joint timeline established under the Political Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation and the CAR. MINUSCA also welcomes the joint roadmap for peace from the ICGLR, and that was produced under the effective coordination of Prime Minister and Head of Government, as well as a result of the personal commitment of the Head of State. The commitment of guarantors and the facilitators of the political agreement and of Angola and Rwanda on behalf of the ICGLR has also been decisive. As things stand, we have no other alternative but to seize the fledgling opportunity we now have to move beyond formal commitments which at times have characterized the peace process. We now have an opportunity to move from those to tangible progress. Such is the ambition of the government and the hope harboured by all international partners, striving to support the implementation of the government timeline. In this regard, I'd like to point to the multiplying effect that has been produced by the beginning of the implementation on the part of the government of that timeline. For example, on the 14th of September, 2022, that is, we saw the beginning by the President of the Republic of the dialogue with leaders of 11 armed groups with a view to their dissolution, and this was pursuant to commitments made under the political agreement. And we've also seen an adjustment of capacities to respond to the needs where disarmament, demobilization and reintegration are concerned. These were needs expressed by certain armed groups. I must also point to the structural reforms underway related to the implementation by decree on the 28th of September 2022 of the Committee of the Integration of Former Combatants. I must also point to the resumption of inspections as part of increasing oversight of the National Defence and Security Forces, and there was an arms and munitions tracing code adopted. Those are just a few of the developments we've seen. We've had coordination meetings chaired by the Prime Minister, and that led to a consensus being established regarding the fact that where the timeline is concerned, the political component is perhaps the most important, because that's necessary for a lasting solution to the political security crisis which continues to plague the country with devastating consequences for civilians. As such, we encourage the government to implement its strategy for the re-engagement of armed groups under the Luanda roadmap. That will ensure the effectiveness of the ceasefire, renouncement of violence, and the completion of talks already undertaken. These talks have been undertaken with the support of the ICGRL in harmony with the AU and ECAS. And of course, MINUSCA has been supporting these talks and all of the above progress, as have international partners. Mr. President, since I entered office in April of this year, I have had several meetings with the people of the CAR. People of all generations and stripes, people of various religious beliefs and traditional affiliations. I've also held discussions with opinion leaders and various associations outside of Bangui in more remote areas of the country. When speaking with the people, I was struck by the fact that they were unanimous in their expectations and desires. The return of peace and security for all people of CAR and across the fullness of national territory, as well as the tangible decentralization of services and opportunities for effective enjoyments of all people of all of their rights, regardless of where they come from, was a unanimous desire. In other words, the people most fervently desire security and inclusion. These demands and expectations of the people of the CAR must be the guiding thread of all parties to the conflict and the mission of all partners of the peace process in the CAR. The unanimous support of the Council is now necessary more than ever before to ensure that the parties have no other alternative than to implement their obligations under the Common Roadmap and the Agreement for Peace and Reconciliation. That will determine peace and stability in the country. Given the fragile nature of the current security situation, we still cannot rule out the possibility of sudden upheaval here. As such, any delay with the implementation of the political track of the joint roadmap is liable to jeopardize progress made and to expose people to new risks of mass violence, given the power struggles currently underway across the CAR's territory. The government timeline for the implementation of the Common Roadmap and the political agreement, if effectively implemented by the CAR government, offers the political tools for the prevention of a new spike in violence. Here we should call upon all regional and international partners of the CAR, as well as upon all the guarantors and facilitators of the peace agreement, to provide coordinated support in line with their comparative advantages to the implementation of the timeline, and this should be done under the effective coordination of the Prime Minister and the strategic directorate of the strategic leadership of the President of the Republic. Progress made in the restoration of the state's authority, including the redeployment of defence and security forces, the redeployment of civil servants, the strengthening of the judicial system, and the promotion of transitional justice mechanisms such as the Special Criminal Court, are all examples of notable progress which should be built upon. Here, I'd like to welcome the beginning of the first trial before the Special Criminal Court aforementioned. I invite the government to renew the mandate of the court, and I call upon the distinguished members of the Council and other countries to increase their financial support and support in terms of expertise to judicial inquiries that are currently underway, such as to allow the effective functioning of this court, because this will ultimately allow us to break the cycle of impunity, and that is a crucial stage for the social reintegration of victims, as well as a stage crucial to national reconciliation. Regarding human rights violation, we've seen the publication of periodic reports and of the annual report mandated by the Council. Moreover, we have a framework for constructive dialogue and accountability, and these allow us to follow up documented violations, as well as to implement recommendations made in the public reports of MINUSCA and by OHCHR. Here, I wish to welcome the commitment of the CAR government during the 49th session of the Human Rights Council to strive harder in terms of the follow-up and implementation of the public reports of MINUSCA and of treaty bodies. I renew our support to the Council and to its member states to mobilize the necessary support in order to strengthen national mechanisms for the promotion and protection of human rights. In the same vein, I wish to express my satisfaction at the high-level dialogue that was initiated by Madame Ilse Brands-Keris, Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, and she did that during her visit at the beginning of October to the CAR. As regards security sector reform, I welcome the efforts of the government of the CAR to continue its progress in terms of strengthening institutional capacities of the security sector. Such capacity is crucial to protect the people. MINUSCA will continue to support this national process. It is a national process which requires the coordinated and transparent support of all the CAR's partners. I wish to underscore here that these efforts to bring about reform are also fully in line with the priorities of the Luanda Roadmap and are serving to restore the state's authorities and to render borders more secure. Respect by the people and institutions of the CAR, as well as by the government and the opposition, of the decision made by the Constitutional Court on the 23rd of September, which declared void the decrees that led to the creation, functioning, an appointment of a drafting committee for the drafting of a draft constitution is to be welcomed. I would here commend the maturity of political stakeholders that continue to ensure that the rule of law prevails. I also encourage the government and the people of the CAR to ferociously guard this institutional heritage, which is a yardstick of political stability and a symbol of the fact that democracy has taken root. In contrast, I must draw the government's attention to the fact it is absolutely necessary to put an end to the manipulation of information, the stigmatization of institutions and of figures. It is also vital to put an end to public incitement to violence. Perpetrators and instigators must be held accountable for their actions. Such actions threaten the fragile balance of a society looking for cohesion. And the vulnerable nature of some of these people means that they are susceptible to manipulation. President, the calm noted in certain parts of national territory thanks to the redeployment of national defense and security forces and the proactive preventive posture of MINUSCA has meant that people are more freely able to move around and has meant that more displaced persons and refugees have been able to return into areas recently freed from the grip of armed groups. However, the humanitarian needs of peoples in these areas remain alarming and must compel humanitarian partners to continue to mobilize. It's also important to consolidate the security and political gains noted in a number of these areas. This must be done through increased commitment on the part of development partners. In particular, I'm calling for partners to once again mobilize to ensure that efforts made to guarantee the socio-economic reintegration of former combatants and the extension of the state's authority, these efforts must continue. Lasting solutions for reintegration of these former combatants within local communities, as well as the reintegration of refugees and displaced persons, are vital. And, if successful, will strengthen the new policy of decentralization which is currently being established. Such efforts will also increase the contribution that local elections make to the democratization process underway, because they will allow inclusion and national reconciliation. Local elections have not taken place since 1988, and as such they're a crucial step towards decentralized governments, as well as the part of the conclusion of a process by which the state's authority will be restored, and they will also allow local authorities to enjoy greater legitimacy towards the people that have elected them. Mr. President, in light of the above, there is still real hope for peace in the CAR. Political efforts aiming to ensure an end to violence are vital, and the MINUSCA's and such efforts are also vital to optimize MINUSCA's mandates and to ensure the continuation of a Republican dialogue. And all of this must be conducted with the support of the guarantors and facilitators of the CAR peace process, as well as with the continued support of regional and international partners. So we have reason to hope, and as such, all parties to the conflict must ensure that a political solution to the crisis prevails. Mediation must be used as a complement to political action. The MINUSCA's deterrent capacity is important, because actors to the conflict still sometimes think that violence is a way forward. So this deterrent capacity is vital. And the Council must play its part here to provide effective and continued support to the country through a robust and flexible mandate, as well as in ensuring that the mission has the resources required. I'd like to hail the Security Council for its foresightedness and wisdom in terms of the mandate that it's given MINUSCA. It is tailored to the challenges and concerns prompted by the situation in the CAR. The most recent report of the Secretary General bore witness to the vital contribution made by the multidimensional mandate of MINUSCA. The government, the sub-region and the people depend on MINUSCA as we all seek a lasting solution to the crisis in the CAR. Thank you for your kind attention.
Je remercie Madame Rugwabiza.
I thank